Hi, this is Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Ulyain village and Relya. So Relya is one of the Ulyain villagers, and now that the player characters are in the village and they're waiting, they're there each day, they notice this woman, Relya, okay? Now, the villagers are very distinct in how they deal with the daily tasks that they have. One of their daily tasks is gathering water from the river, okay? Now, this is done in the morning. Every single villager has their own like water jug that they fill up, and then they carry it back to the village, okay? Now, when this is done, it's done in different ways. So one of the things that happens is some of the villagers are very fortunate, and some of the strong hunter types will do this for them, although the villagers will walk with them. So a lot of times there'll be, the ratio will be about only 75% of the people who are actually walking to get the water are actually carrying water. And so the hunters will carry water for some of the other villagers, right? And it's a very social time. People talk. It takes longer than it should, Matron Arlel comes along. She walks with a lot of the people sometimes, not every day, right? But there's Relya, okay? Now, all the villagers get a jug of water, and then if more jugs are needed throughout the day, kids will be sent to get additional jugs generally. But Relya does all of her own water carrying. There's never any hunter that helps her, okay? And she makes 4 trips a day, and she is always alone. There's always like a circle of about 10 or 15 feet around her. None of the villagers really talk to her. She never has a smile on her face. And the non-player characters notice her because she's distinct, all right? She has stark red hair, long and straight. She has pale skin and green eyes, okay? And so that's Relya, right? And so basically on one of the days, you will tell the player characters, you guys notice Relya. And you notice she's always carrying her jug of water. And at this point, you want to kind of say this in a way where, and actually, they may not even recognize it, but this is a decision point. There's this lone villager who always carries her own water. She never has any help. She doesn't seem happy. Now, all of your player characters can ignore that hook, or one of them may say, you know what, I'm going to help Relya, okay? So Relya, actually, they're going to need to make a charisma check. If they're successful on their charisma check, then Relya will allow them to help, okay? But on that first day, they help Relya, okay? She says, thank you. That's the end of it, okay? Next day comes along, and then at this point, the rest of this all unfolds over various days, but the decision point is on one day. So the next day, if the person continues to help Relya will ask them if they've seen any of the Mazera spikes. And if they say no, she'll say, oh, right? And then when they get back to the village, actually, when they're at the river, she'll say, this is the Mazera. The river is called the Mazera. So the river around the Ulyain village is called the Mazera, okay? She says, now, up in the mountains, every now and then throughout the year, ice sheets will break off. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 ice sheets. Sometimes it can be a cascade of a lot of ice sheets. And depending on how they cast down on the mountain, sometimes they'll turn into really large gushes of water, and it'll make the Mazera spike. She says, so watch. The teenagers in the village are very good at this. They'll notice a few patterns of birds flying out of the trees, and that's a surge. Okay? That's a spike, excuse me. And then you'll see them grab one of the ruffra boards. Now, the ruffra is the fruit that is harvested by the Ulyain people. They keep these boards where they do some of the processing for the ruffra fruit. They keep these boards out, okay? They keep them near the river, okay? So when there is a spike, all the teenagers, or a lot of the teenagers, not all the teenagers, a lot of the teenagers will run for the river. They'll jump on their Mazera boards, and they'll jump into the river, and it will take them on a ride of anywhere from 100 to even 1,000 feet, okay? And they'll all kind of compete to see who can do the most tricks on these these river spikes, right? Where the water kind of flows much faster. There's, waves, all that kind of thing within the river. Okay. Now, so that's all Relya says that day. Okay. The more that, and then each day when the player characters walk with Relya, she becomes more open to talking to them. And then she begins to talk to them in earnest, okay? And one of the things that happens that the player characters are doing is they begin dealing with Relya each day, and at this point I'm parked, by the way. So Relya continues to do her thing, and she is walking with them. And the next day, she says, "Hey, have you ever wondered why you have to help me and why nobody else helps me?" And the player characters, if they say yes, she'll say, "Well, about 2 years ago, I lost my son on this river." Okay, my son's name was Thel, right? And she will explain that Thel had green hair. Had blonde hair, green eyes, and he would like to crush. He would like to crush strawberries into his peltha juice and drink it that way. And he died 2 years ago. That's it. That's all she says that day. Okay. Then at that point, she. Here you go. That's all she says, right? So a couple more days from that, she'll say, "Have you ever?" She says, "Has anybody ever told you about the Mazera surges?" Right? And they'll say no, because the villagers haven't. She says, "Well, when there's a Mazera surge, many of the ice sheets have come off the mountain. When that happens, the waves that the teenage kids here in the village ride, it can push them 1 or 3 miles down the river. 50 years ago, we lost a villager child in one of the Mazera surges. And 2 years ago, we lost my son." That's it. That's all she says that day. Okay? And so it's just one of those things where, and so she keeps talking about, to the player characters. And then so at this point, on another day, she'll say, and this will be the last day, okay? This is the last day where she gives information, okay? Because it's a turning point, right? And she will say, "Hey, it's really kind that you've been helping me to carry all this water." And then she says, "My husband, his name was Gregan, and I lost my son 2 years ago, but I lost my husband a year ago. And the reason I lost him, the reason he left his village was, when we could not find Thel's body in the river, he searched for a year. And he would go up and down the river. He would do all of his tasks for the village. But after a year, he came to me and he said, 'I don't want to look for Thel anymore. He's gone. And we need to live together and go forward.'" And she then says to you, to the player character, that when Gregan said that, she said, "I hope tomorrow you go out and you look for Thel. And just like him, I want you to go out one more day, because today you told me you didn't want to look for Thel's body anymore. But tomorrow, I want you to go out and look for Thel's body. And if you don't find it, I don't want you to come back." And that's why nobody walks with Relya, right? And she then, she's crying, and they've stopped, and all the villagers are in front of them. And she says to the player character, "I know you're an adventurer. Gregan, he was very large. He was about 6'4". He had brown hair, and he tied his beard in 2 knots. Have you ever seen him?" And so she asked the player character. Now, you could do that any way you want with the player characters. One, you could say, you can have them make a fortune roll, right? And if they get it, they get it. And then they have to decide whether to tell her, "Yes, I've seen him," or not. And then Relya may leave the village, or she may ask them to lead her out, right? and to the point where they saw Gragan, her husband, right? And at that point, also, they may say, no, I'm sorry, I've never seen him, okay? And at that point, this is a turning point with Relya. So there's a few things that happened, right? So one, with Relya, at that point, there's no role or anything like that, but the player characters, when they ask people about the village, they are the folk heroes of the town, but the villagers are always protective of their village, and they'll tell the people what they want to share, right? But if there's secrets among the villagers, they keep those secrets. Well, Relya no longer does that, and she has complete trust for the player character who has walked with her all this time, right? And so that is a bond where, at that point, Relya will answer any questions that player character has about the village, and there are quite a few, even to the point of the burial note, what happens with the Ulyain bodies, why they're placed in the forest. She will answer that, and I will answer that for you in another video. But at this point, they'll become a bond, and Relya will become a true ally of that player character. And then you also need to decide what you're going to do as far as if one of the player characters, how you're going to manage if one of the player characters saw Gragan or not. And that's the story of Relya. And, and then one last thing. So, just so you're aware, of course, what will happen is if you play your campaign either 3, 5, or 7 sessions more, probably around 5 or 7 sessions later, you can bet that the player characters go to a tavern. And they'll sit down and they'll be eating their mutton and they'll be drinking their mead. And sure enough, there will be a blonde stranger who comes in with green eyes. And he's going to slam a gold piece on the table and he's going to say, I want Pelyath milk and strawberries. He's going to squeeze those strawberries into the Pelyath milk. And sure enough, they will have seen Relya's son. And then they're going to need to deal with why was he, why did he disappear? Why was his body never found? And why is he right there? Now, that's the story of Relya. Take care.